Hi folks, well we're at the first planting of the garden for 2021. This is a bit earlier than I expected to be able to do it since it's still April, but the ground dried out enough that I could till part of it where I want to plant my potatoes and onions, and of course they can go in fairly early. I'm going to do that sort of no-till planting style again, where you just basically throw them on top of the dirt and then you cover it with several inches of hay. I'll show you that as we walk through it. I had mixed results with that last year. Of course, some of the problem is I may have just not harvested them soon enough, but we'll try again this year. So I got a bunch of seed potatoes here from my local ag store. These are Yukon Gold, and as you can see, they're called seed potatoes because they've got eyes growing on them. You can't plant potatoes that don't have the eyes because they won't germinate into anything, but these do. Now, to maximize your crop without spending a whole lot of money, you don't need to plant a whole potato like this. So what I've done here with another one, just to show you, is you slice them up into pieces, and as long as each piece has an eye on it, growing on it, this little knob here is called an eye, each one of these should grow into a plant and produce potatoes. So for example, this particular one here was a medium-sized potato. I've cut it into 7 pieces, and maybe I'll get 6-7 plants out of it, who knows. I've seen some places on gardening advice videos and channels that they say after you cut these you should leave them alone for a couple days before you plant them. You shouldn't plant them right away. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that is, but I've never done that. When I've planted seed potatoes before, I just cut them up right before I was ready to put them in the garden. Now that's both ways, both planting them deep and also throwing them on top. So I'm not going to waste any time doing that. I've got some time here before dark yet. I have brought the tiller out, went through the section of the garden where I'm going to plant them just to stir up the soil. I haven't done anything in there since last fall. And it tilled up very nicely. It's not too muddy. So I'm going to cut the rest of these up. I've got a couple bales of old hay in the barn that I'm going to use to cover them, and I'll walk you through that. I think last year I just showed you after it was all done. But there was a woman back in the 30s or 40s or 20s, I don't remember when, who was supposed to have pioneered this method of growing vegetables. And I can't remember her name. Check on the internet. There are lots of YouTube videos where people are talking either her life story or people use her methodology. But this is the same thing I'm trying here, just to save time, because potatoes are normally a labor-intensive crop, because you have to till deep, dig some of the dirt out, till again, so that you can get about a 6-inch deep trench to put the potatoes in. After they're in, you cover it back over and you hill it up. Again, that's all done by hand with a hoe. And then later on, after the plants start to germinate and come up, you have to keep hilling, so that because the potatoes don't grow on the very bottom in the roots, they're sort of in the middle of the plant, and so you've got to have a nice mound there normally, so that with loose soil, so that the potatoes grow in a nice size. This methodology is different. They can grow better because they're actually above the soil but under the hay, so you don't need to do any hilling. The only thing that I ran into last year, I should have put a second application of hay on after they came up, because I did have a weed problem. I didn't have the hay thick enough to choke out all the other weeds. So we'll see what happens. Again, I tried it with the onions last year. I had mixed results. I got a bag of seed onions, an onion starters at the same ag store. They're supposed to be a sweet variety, a sweet cooking onion. So we'll see what happens. I got 2 different varieties in there. I'm just experimenting, so to speak. But this is the plan, and I'll be back to you when we're doing it more. So I've taken this section of my garden, as you can see, ran the tiller through it a couple times, and then just raked the top lightly with a garden rake just to smooth it out. You want the soil to be somewhat loose and aerated, because the stuff does have to grow on the top of it, and this being heavy clay, it's easy for it to pack down. So I'll try to stay off of it as much as I can while I'm planting. Again, it's no big deal. I'm just going to basically throw the onions where they fall, and the potatoes I'll kind of sort of space them, but I won't worry so much about a row. But because they get a little bigger than the onions do, I have to be a little more particular. But I'll come back to you and show you how that's done. Okay, as you can see, I've got the potatoes. Oh, there's that tom turkey gobbling. We're in spring gobbler season just about now, so they're chasing the hens around. It's getting towards evening, they're getting a bit rambunctious. And we got deer scattered here, there, and everywhere too. At any rate, back to what we were talking about. I sort of put the potatoes in rows, nothing fancy. Just enough spacing so that they won't crowd each other. Wasn't worried about the rows being straight. And then with the onions, you can see there's two different types there, one that's more white looking and one that's more yellow looking. I just kind of scattered them in wherever they fit. So this is quick and easy planting. Now all I have to do is put hay over top of this. I hope I'm just not giving the rabbits and the mice a meal with doing all this. I've got to try to close up my garden again here, but with this opportunity to get this early planting done, I thought I'd take it. So a whole onion and potato patch from start to finish in a matter of actual working time, maybe an hour and a half. But I'll come back to you when I finish it up with the hay. All right, there we go. We got the whole bed here now covered with hay. Not quite as much as I need, but I used what I had. Had a few more bales in the barn, but my wife got into them for her chickens. She got confused between hay and straw, I guess. She needed the straw for the chickens for bedding, not the hay. But at any rate, and there's reasons for both of those. First of all, you do not want to put straw out on this, because straw is basically inert. It's not going to do anything to help the crops grow, and it will not choke out the weeds as well. The hay will mat down when it gets wet, and it will decompose and add nutrients to the soil. So that, of course, helps your crop grow. The straw won't mat down really, and it's got almost no nutrients in because it's stubble. It's dried stems from grain. So straw is usually used just for bedding purposes with animals. There's no nutritional value. You won't see animals eating straw. They eat hay. And the same thing, she really didn't want the hay in the chicken coop, because if it stayed in there for a while, it could get moldy or have, bugs, bacteria, whatever, and stuff in it as it decomposes. Whereas the straw would stay basically inert. It'd still do the job you needed to do to catch the droppings, but it was healthier for the chickens. So, lesson learned. And we are going to go ahead with this. I've got to get some more hay from my son's farm and top this off, but this is enough to at least give it an initial cover, but I want to get more on it. They recommend 6 to 8 thick inches of hay to cover these, to choke the weeds out and to protect the young plants starting. Now this is just like a first cutting hay. It's nothing special. It's not a mushroom hay. It's not a high quality alfalfa hay. It was just basically my son's first cutting a number of years ago. It's a few years old. It doesn't need to be fresh hay because there's no nutrition in it that animals have to eat. Second cutting hay can be used, but that's also far more expensive because it's more nutritious, so farmers with cattle want the second cutting. Also, the second cutting is nowhere near as voluminous as the first cutting of hay, so you don't get as much of it. So therefore, the prices are higher for it. You don't need that. That's not necessary. For cows to give milk, for beef to put weight on, yes. For garden mulching like this, no. Just a cheap first cutting hay, as opposed to straw, is just what you want. Eventually this is gonna break down. It'll decompose and go into the soil. It'll enrich the soil, and that's all it needs to do. Protect the crops and add extra natural fertilizer. So I will come back to you later in the spring. Hopefully we'll we'll be seeing some green plants come up through here after all danger of frost is past. And then I'll monitor the progress on this. This is the second year I'm trying this. I hope I have a better result than last year. But if it saves me a ton of work with potatoes and onions, hey, it'd be great to eat your own rather than have to buy them. Not that they're all that expensive, but you know what I'm talking about if you live out in the country, how much better your own food tastes. So thank you for watching, and I hope your gardening is going well at this point in the year, if you've started, depending where you live, or you will be starting soon. And we'll come back to you with more updates as the spring turns into the summer.